Welcome to Making the Cut podcast with Chris Hill and Sean Winter, where we help you succeed in life and business by sharing principles and strategies that guide some of the most successful people in the world.
Welcome to episode 10 of the Making the Cut podcast. I'm Chris Hill with my co-host, Sean Winter. Today we have a special guest in the house, Mr. Mike Robbins. Mike infuses life and business with authenticity and appreciation. So on that note, Sean, you got something funny for us today, man?
I do, Chris. With us talking to Mike Robbins, he has a podcast called Bring Your Whole Self to Work, and he talks about being authentic, talks about teamwork, leadership, all these things. So we're going to do one on teamwork. Why is teamwork important, Chris?
Oh, man, I don't know. What you got?
It helps to put the blame on someone else. But seriously, Mike has a very interesting story. I've heard a couple of his TED Talks. He talks about authenticity. He talks about how people sometimes can be a little too critical on themselves. And so I'm very excited to talk with him and really dive into the mental state that people go through when they're trying to transform from one person in terms of who they are today to another person, which is that ideal state that they want to go to. So I'm very interested in talking with him about that stuff. So you actually have followed him for a little while, right?
I have, actually. I've followed him for several years now. And what I really find interesting is, he does a lot of work with Fortune 500 companies. I know work with Google, Wells Fargo, Microsoft, Charles Schwab, Twitter, Deloitte, and the list goes on. And with all these companies that he works with, it's not really about the company itself. It's really about the person and the people that show up each day. So he focuses a lot on actually making people understand that they can contribute in a more positive and more helpful and, again, authentic way. So Mike's written 3 books. Focus on the good stuff. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. And his 3rd book, most recently, Nothing Changes Until You Do. And like you mentioned before, the podcast, Bring Your Whole Self to Work, that's actually the title of his 4th book coming out next year. So I'm excited to talk about authenticity, appreciation, and then again, some of the management stuff that his podcast does a great job of discussing with a lot of thought leaders from around the world. So with that, Sean, what do you say? Hop in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All righty, let's go. Hey there, Mike. How's it going?
It's good, man. Glad to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right in. Can you give us a little bit of background and how you got started in this whole area?
Yeah, well, my story is kind of an interesting, unique one. I actually grew up as an athlete. Played baseball most of my life. Really loved it. Was pretty good at it. Actually got drafted out of high school by the New York Yankees. Didn't end up signing with the Yankees because I got an opportunity to play baseball at Stanford University, which was cool. And went to Stanford, played there. Then I got drafted out of Stanford by the Kansas City Royals, and I signed my contract. The way it works in baseball, you get drafted by a major league team. You have to, even if you sign a contract, you have to go into the minor leagues. So I go into the minors, trying to work my way up to the big leagues. I was a pitcher doing pretty well. Unfortunately for me, my 3rd season in the minors, I went out to pitch one night. I threw one pitch. I tore ligaments in my elbow, and I blew my arm out. So I was 23 at the time. I had started playing baseball when I was 7. And, 3 surgeries later, a couple years later, I finally had to walk away from baseball. And, I was pretty devastated by the experience. But at the same time, it taught me a lot. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned as I kind of looked back and was reflecting on the whole experience once it was over was, oops, I forgot to appreciate it. I spent most of my time thinking I wasn't good enough and comparing myself to everyone around me and holding my breath, hoping that I didn't mess it up. And when it was all over, I thought, man, if I could do that again, I would have enjoyed it more. And, I didn't know the full significance of that lesson, but it was the late 90s at the time I went into the .com world, which was I live out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, grew up here, still live here. That's what was happening here, especially got a job working for an internet company, worked there for about a year and a half, then a startup, and we were all going to get rich. It was going to go public, and then the .com bubble burst, and I lost my job. And even though it wasn't nearly as emotional as the baseball experience, I similarly had an experience wow, people weren't, myself included, weren't really appreciating what we had while we had it. It was once it went away. And so that just really got me thinking kind of personally about this whole concept. And then I really had this kind of deep yearning within me. I think I want to tell my story. I want to share. I want to learn whatever I can learn and teach whatever I can teach. I mean, I was young at the time. I was 26, and I just had this kind of inner calling saying I should move in that direction, even though I didn't really know what that meant. And, 16 or so years ago when this was, there was no social media. The blog world was, literally only people like Seth Godin, who were like trailblazers, were blogging. I remember hearing him talk about it in 2001 going, what's a blog? But, so there was the only way to get to market, if you will, or to get people to start speaking and coaching, and was to write a book and to, get on Oprah or on TV or something. But that was sort of the path that I decided that I wanted to go down. And at the beginning of 2001, I just said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a speaker and a coach and hopefully an author one day if I can learn how to write. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea if it would happen, but I figured I'd give myself a year, and I'd design my own curriculum, which meant take as many workshops and classes and meet with as many people as I possibly could. And at the end of the year, if I couldn't figure out how to make a living doing this, I'd go find a job. And all these years later, I haven't had to go find a job. So I guess it worked out okay.
So, Mike,
very cool.
In order for you to do that, I'm sure you had to manage a lot of self-talk that was just swirling around, right? So you probably had some maybe negative self-talk. And how did you get through that? Because there's a lot of people that are in situations, maybe it's dire straits, they want to make a change, but it's that explanatory style that's holding them back. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, let me first just say, yes, I had a lot of self-doubt and a lot of negative self-talk at the time back then. And you know what? I still do now. So I think it's something that we all have to learn how to manage. It changes over time. The conversation and the story may be a little bit different, but I think it's part of being human. And it's something I dealt with for many years as an athlete. When I was much younger, guys, I thought I was crazy, right? I thought I was just, something was wrong with me. I was insecure. I'd look around at everyone around me and go, they seem really confident. How come I seem so insecure? Of course, I have since found out that most of us are doing a really good job acting and pretending. And so, the whole saying, we compare our insides to other people's outsides, and we often feel like we don't measure up. But for me in the early days with my business, I was 26. I didn't know what I was doing. But thankfully for me, one of the things that I did was I wasn't afraid of my own self-talk. So I would talk about it. I would share it. I was, somebody who's been, getting help and support through counseling and therapy and then coaching and you name it from the time I was quite young. So I didn't have any resistance or barriers to look, this is hard and this is scary and I don't really know what I'm doing. So I'm going to reach out for help and support. And I also was really fortunate. I had just met my now wife. Michelle and I have been together for 16 and a half years, right about 2 months before I started my business. And she'd actually started her own business. She was in the process of actually learning to become a coach at the time, but had started her own business in the staffing world. And so had a staffing company. And she had just gone through that a few years prior. And she was an incredible support, both mentally and emotionally, but also very practically. Hey, look, this is just how it feels. This is there's nothing, you know what I mean? So I think a lot of it is just making peace with the fact that that is part of the process. And at some level, without being pessimistic about it, I often say to people, that never goes away completely. It changes and evolves. You don't have to listen to those voices and let them run your life. But that little crazy voice in our head, the gremlin, I call it, is always going to be there. And the more we try to step out and do anything new or different, the more that voice screams at us, get back in line, get back in your box. What are you doing? You're going to fall and fail and look like an idiot. And don't you remember that, that's always going to happen. So we got to figure out how to make a relationship with that voice and not let it run our lives.
Right. I can tell you as a former baseball player myself, I was a lefty. So I was a pitcher growing up, and like you, obviously not nearly as accomplished as yourself, but you're there on the mound, and the whole stands, your whole team's depending on you to throw this pitch
right
in the right place. It's the ninth inning. It's bottom of the ninth. You're up by 1 run, and you come in as a reliever or something like that. How does that situation? Do you think that ties into self-talk, or is that more of just a state thing?
It's probably a little bit of both. I do think for what it's worth, it sounds like, you've had some sports experience, as have I. I think those things, for me at least, they were at the time really helpful, even though kind of scary and unnerving. But now in my life, I'm grateful for that experience, because I do think there's a way as we practice more, we can train our minds to focus more on what we want as opposed to just getting overwhelmed by the moment. But I do think that, again, here's one of the interesting paradoxes of life is that we're constantly wanting to be good at things, right? Like we want to master tasks, we want to master skills, we want to get really good. And Chris, in your case, and Sean, you guys, whether we're talking about a master chef, whether we're talking about an athlete, whether we're talking about a business person, an entrepreneur, an artist. But what's interesting is what we don't spend a lot of time on in life is mastering ourselves and really getting in touch with, again, from an emotional intelligence perspective, like, who am I? How do I feel? How do I operate? What makes me tick? What fires me up? What freaks me out? To get really curious about those things, because we're so focused, again, like think of sports, right? You're talking about pitching. It's like the task is pretty intense and overwhelming, and there's a lot of pressure. You either win or you don't. You either throw a strike or a ball. You either get the guy out or he hits a home run, or you know what I mean? And so we're so focused on the outcome and the task that what we sometimes forget to do, I think, is focus on ourselves, not in a self-absorbed way or even a self-conscious way, but in a self-aware way. And that's something that I continue to try to practice in my life as best as I can, because I know when I get right with myself, if I'm in the right state, if I'm in the right state of mind, if I'm focused on the right things, it's not a guarantee that I'm going to succeed, but it's much more likely that I will. And either way, whatever the outcome may be, I'm actually more centered and in my own power, if you will. Because I think we tend to give away our power so often to the outcome, to the result. And it could be in anything, right? It's like we could have a great podcast interview here and all feel really good about it. And then if we're waiting to see how many people listen to it to decide if it was good or not, we've given our power away to the result.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I gave a talk up in New York on Tuesday, and I've gotten better at it as I've had more experience, but it's that same thing where it's like, oh, what's the audience going to think? Well,
right.
How many views will it have on YouTube after I posted, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Versus, how can I make sure that I'm present and there to deliver the message that these people want from me versus feeling I have to impress somebody.
And it's tricky, I think, because look, we're human, we have egos. It's not that the results aren't important, right? So how do we balance that? How do we manage that? I think, again, we live in a culture that's obsessed with outcomes. But one of my greatest teachers in this process, again, was my sports experience, because there were times that I went out on the mound and I pitched really well and I lost. The outcome was, because baseball's a funny game. It's like one or two things go one way or the other in a game, and that determines the outcome. A bad call, a bad play, close this and that. You know what I mean? Ooh, it's 3-2, bases loaded. I throw a pitch on the black. Did he call it a strike or a ball? If he calls it a strike and I get out of the inning, that may be a great game. If he calls it a ball and I walk in a run and then I unravel mentally, that could be a 6-run inning and it's a disaster, right? So the thing is, though, that what I learned about it was, as much as I wanted to win and as attached as I was to the outcome, I had to figure out a way to find some place within myself that was at peace, irrespective of the outcome. And that wasn't easy. It was a struggle then, and I was much younger. It's still a struggle at times in my life now. Again, with my work, to your point, it's like whatever the outcome we want, you get up and give a speech in New York and post it on YouTube. And there are parameters by which you determine some kind of success that you're, outward success that you're tracking. We do this, again, as entrepreneurs in our businesses with the money that we make or the products that we sell or whatever it is. And we've got to figure out a way to look at those things as those are outcomes. That's the scoreboard. That's not the game. Mm-hmm. And when we get obsessed with the scoreboard, we forget that really where it's at is in playing the game. And I have to remind myself of this all the time because I really like looking at the scoreboard, right? But it's dangerous when we get obsessed with the scoreboard and we forget, wait a minute, right? In the world, in the social media, Instagram, Facebook world that we live in, sometimes I even ask myself, am I living my life in the present moment, or am I simply living my life so that I can post it on Instagram or on Facebook and have people think I have a great life? Because that's backwards. But sometimes that's right. We're more interested in getting the photo or the video of the experience than being in the experience. And not that there's anything wrong with posting it and sharing it if we want to, because we think it's cool or we think it might benefit someone else. But what about the experience? My girls, I have two girls who are 11 and 8, and they danced a couple weeks ago at halftime at the Golden State Warriors game, which was awesome, right? I mean, we live in the Bay Area. We're big Warriors fans, and their dance company got invited. So I was all excited, and we had tickets with the whole dance group, and the tickets were kind of up in the nosebleeds. And I like snuck down at halftime so I could get close, so I could take a video. And I decided I wanted to not only take a video, but I wanted to put it on Facebook Live because I'd be cool. Some of our friends who couldn't come, they could see it and whatever. And I was so like involved in trying to get the video right and make sure I could see them. And I was a little close, and it was a little weird. The video came out terrible, and I basically missed the performance. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I saw it, but I was like, and afterwards I reflected on it, and I was so frustrated. Like I know better. I talk about this. I realize this, but like I missed the experience by focusing so much on capturing the experience. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And that, even back to your question, right, about the self-talk, that's so much of what goes on. We're so worried about how it's going to be perceived and how it's going to turn out and what might happen or what might not happen. We sit around assessing ourselves or judging ourselves, and we miss the moments.
So Mike, how does this tie into authenticity?
Well, I mean, it really is about, look, authenticity. The way that I define authenticity is honesty without self-righteousness and with vulnerability. So how the self-talk piece ties into it, first of all, just to be honest in life, honest with ourselves, honest with other people, that is no small thing. That is not the easiest thing. And it's not like most of us are liars and we're deceiving and manipulating people, but to really be honest. What do I want? How do I feel? What do I think? And then, so first and foremost, our negative self-talk often gets in the way of us being honest about things because, like, oh, I might hurt someone's feelings, or people might disagree with that, or that might not work. But if we even have the courage to be honest, a lot of times what we do is we wait till we think we're right, and then we'll be honest. But we're honest in a self-righteous way, which pushes other people away. Because self-righteousness is one of the most damaging and off-putting energies that we carry as humans. Because if I'm right and you don't agree with me, that makes you wrong. And so even if I'm honest about my righteousness, like I'm going to push you away. So we have to be able to then notice, oh, where does self-righteousness come from? Oh, it comes from fear. We're self-righteous when there's some fear that we have that we may be wrong. And the more righteous we are, usually the more afraid we are that what we think and how we feel is somehow wrong. But if we can be convicted, really passionate about what we believe in, and communicate that or show up consciously and courageously and honestly about it, that's very different. And then the final piece, right? So honesty without self-righteousness, we got to see it and be able to remove it, and then add vulnerability. And vulnerability, look, the thing about vulnerability is it's fundamentally uncomfortable. And so what happens is when we're trying to do anything new, right? You ask someone out on a date, you write something new, you stand up in front of a group of people to speak, you try an activity you've never tried before, or maybe something you're not that good at, or maybe something that just the stakes are really high and you want it to go well. It could even be something, I mean, I've been with my wife for 16 plus years. There are times I want to do things or say things or try things or ask her for something, and I'll feel funny about it. Not because I think she's going to hate me and run away, but because like, oh, this is different than the way we normally interact. Like there are lots of things that take courage for us to do in life. And in order for us to get to that courageous place, we have to walk through vulnerability. But vulnerability is uncomfortable, and it's what stops us from doing things. We don't like the discomfort of the vulnerability, so we don't do it, right? And so if we can get more comfortable with, oh, vulnerability is not necessarily bad or good, it just is. It's part of the process. It's part of what it takes to be successful. It's part of what it takes to connect intimately with other people. It's part of what it takes to build trust. It's part of what it takes to do anything creatively, right? You guys know this, right? What gets in the way of us expressing ourselves creatively? The voice in our head that says, this is stupid, or no one will care, or why am I doing this, or all of that. And that's trying to protect us from that vulnerability. So the negative self-talk and all the fear associated with it has everything to do with authenticity. And it's not that we're somehow going to get rid of it completely and it's going to magically go away. That's some erroneous notion. But it's that we're going to get more comfortable with the discomfort of it. Again, think of public speaking. Why are people so afraid of public speaking? Because it's vulnerable. You stand up in front of a group of people and everybody's looking at you and evaluating you and judging you. I had a man come up to me after an event last week in Napa, and he said, Mike, I've been speaking at my church for years. We have a huge congregation and there's so many people there. And he's like, I can't ever get rid of my nerves. He's like, I just watched you speak for the last 2 hours. Like, how did you get rid of your nerves? And I looked at him and said, what do you mean get rid of my nerves? You think I'm not human? Of course I get nervous. My passion for this, my commitment to this is bigger than my fear. Right. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, that's what I do too. And I was like, yeah, you get up in front of that church and speak all the time. It's not that you're not afraid. It's just there's something more important to you than the fear. So you deal with it and allow yourself to stand up anyway. Right. And that's what we all have to do in life whenever we're faced with something that scares us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very important. It's almost like a portion of what you're saying is like the concept of leaning in and, feel the fear, do it anyway. I know for me personally, I didn't have a background in baseball. My background was in martial arts. So when I jumped into the ring with someone, I had to have that false sense of confidence at times. And inside I'm shaking because this guy's, twice my size and his reach is 6-7 inches longer than me. I know he's going to jab all day long and just knock me on my chin. So what was hard for me was growing up in an environment where I had to have that false sense of confidence and then turning it off and becoming vulnerable situationally when it does matter, So it was very, very, very hard for me to kind of figure it out. For someone that's kind of in that space where it's almost like they have to situationally have that false sense of confidence, how do they navigate those waters to be able to turn it on, turn it off? Or is what you think is to maybe don't even turn it on at all and lean into that complete vulnerability?
Well, look, I mean, I think we all live in the real world. There are situations and times in life when, it's important to, as you're talking about I never did martial arts. One of the reasons was it terrified me. The thought of like martial arts or boxing or being a mano-a-mano with some other dude that could hurt me. Like, no, thank you. I don't want to play. But that being said, it's like, I think there is a time in life when it's valuable to fake it till you make it. Right. And that doesn't necessarily contradict what I'm talking about in terms of authenticity and vulnerability. The thing, though, and look, I think there's a different aspect of this. I think this is challenging for us as human beings. I think for us as men, and there's 3 of us men having this conversation. Obviously, there's probably men and women listening to us, so I don't mean to exclude the women, but there's a unique aspect of this for us as men that's challenging. And from some of my research and interviews and talking to lots of women, I think there's a unique aspect that's challenging for women in a different way. But for us as men, we've been taught and trained, be a man, suck it up. Boys don't cry. Don't be a wimp. Don't be weak. All of these messages that we've gotten, regardless of where we were raised or how we were raised or how old we are. I mean, look, the younger we are, hopefully, the less we got those messages, but they're still there even in this day and age. And the older we are, the more that was just the way teachers, coaches, parents, everyone talked to us. There's more awareness of this now. We're doing the best we can as we're raising our children not to do that as much, but we still all get the be a man training at some point. And part of that says for you to be successful, you got to be the man. You got to exude confidence. You got to never let them see you sweat. You got to suck it up and just, right? I think that's done us a disservice. Now, again, there are certain times and in certain moments, you go into a meeting, you go into a situation, you stand up in front of a group of people, whatever the case may be, you want to exude a certain amount of confidence. However, authentic confidence doesn't mean you have no fear. Because that's not human. That's not reality. That's some Hollywood version, or I don't even know what, some version that we decided. That's like, from some comic book or some movie we watched when we were kids. So now sometimes it may make sense in the moment to even share or express some of the fear or doubt or insecurity of what's going on. You don't have to, though. But I often will say to people will say to me, you mean I'm supposed to walk in the room and just be real about how I actually feel? They're going to think I'm crazy. And I'm like, well, maybe not in that moment. Maybe not when you go in to pitch your idea or when you're going to, try to sell something or whatever. But hopefully before you walk into the room, you have someone who you can really get real with about how you're actually feeling. Because if you don't in some way acknowledge what's real and what's true, you're going to be operating as a compensation for that, and it's not sustainable. And it might work in the short term, but over the long haul, it's going to burn you out. It's going to stress you out. And even when we succeed in that way, we do it as a way where we think we've just fooled everybody, right? And we've all had that experience. It's called the imposter syndrome, right? It's like you get somewhere and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? If they really knew what I was going on inside, they'd kick me out. And this happens in our relationships and this happens in business. So at some level, there is a reckoning that we have to make with ourselves. And the thing and I'll just speak briefly to what I've heard from and have learned from talking to many women over the years is, again, it varies. And look, not all men are the same and not all women are the same, but women have been raised and trained in a different way than we have as men. And so the vulnerability thing, particularly in business and in the business world, is that oftentimes women have been taught and trained and told, don't do that, because they're going to go, oh, there she goes being emotional, or there's, which is, in my opinion, which I can imagine and understand how difficult that would be, what a disservice, because part of what makes us who we are is our emotions and how we feel and being able to connect in a heartfelt, genuine way. And sometimes when I talk to women or I'm coaching women or I've heard about this phenomenon, it's like, yeah, they won't take me seriously. It's even more important. Like, I have to compensate more because it's still, as much progress as we've made, it's still very much a masculine, male-oriented world that we live in, particularly when we're talking about goals and we're talking about business and making things happen. And so for a lot of women, there's this tendency and this pressure to feel like I have to operate inauthentically because I want to be successful in that world and I want to be taken seriously. So therefore, vulnerability becomes a no-no, but for a different reason. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very interesting. To speak on the work side of things, I think a lot of folks don't like to be vulnerable because then obviously that makes you exposed, and then people can, hurt you in different ways.
Yep.
And at the same time, folks are trying to prove their self-worth, so they might have some sort of, self-righteousness to the way they show up. Do you have any suggestions for folks listening? I love your icebreak, or the iceberg, icebreaker, I guess you'd call it, that you did with that you do. Actually, I used that in my talk recently to talk about how we can bring the water line down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so the metaphor that I used, I'm talking about authenticity, is the somewhat overused metaphor, but it fits really nicely here, is the iceberg, right? That, like, and what we're talking about here, and even back, Sean, to your question about the false confidence, that's the sort of piece that the tip of the iceberg, that's what pops up above the surface. That's what we want everybody to see. Look at me. I'm smart. I'm talented. I'm confident. I'm dressed well. I present myself to the world. Again, that's our shiny posts we put up on Instagram or on Facebook or on our website. And like, hey, what's down below the waterline is all of who we are. It's not that above the waterline stuff isn't real. It is. But it's oftentimes our image or our, how we want to be perceived. A friend of mine likes to say it's like we send out our representatives to go meet with other people's representatives, as opposed to really just meeting with each other. So the exercise that I often do, and I do this a lot with, leadership teams and when I'm speaking in the corporate world and other places, is to have people either in a small group, or if it's a small enough team, the whole group, or maybe just pair up. Like, I spoke at an event yesterday and I had a couple hundred people in the room, but we just paired up. And the conversation that we have is, and I always go first to model it, but when it's your turn to talk, you just repeat the phrase, if you really knew me, you'd know this. And there's no pressure to, like, you have to say something, but it's really just lower the waterline on your iceberg. Allow yourself to be more real, more vulnerable. What's really going on? What are you really thinking about? How are you really feeling? What's really happening in this moment? And oftentimes what people share, I mean, it's different stuff for everybody, of course, but like, people share about their fears or their doubts or their insecurities, or maybe sometimes their hopes or their dreams or their passions or some of their hurts or sadness or, whatever, the stuff that people are carrying, the real stuff. And even though it's a little scary and it can be a little awkward and it's not the normal conversation we have in life, particularly at work, what's amazing, and I mean, I've been doing this exercise with groups of people for over a decade now, I'm always amazed at what comes out of that conversation, because first of all, people get to know each other a little bit better, even if they know each other pretty well. But more importantly, almost always I ask this question after we do the exercise. I'll say, how many of you could relate to what your partner was talking about, or what the group was talking about, depending on the format in which we do the exercise? And like, everybody raises their hands. And I say, yeah, you know why you could relate? Because the natural human response to vulnerability is empathy. And so the paradox is, do people judge us? Yes. But the more willing we are to actually show up and be ourselves, the more connection we create, the more trust we build, the more empathy is there. And we think people are going to use that stuff against us, where more often than not, what ends up happening is we build more of what I call personal credibility. Professional credibility is about your resume. It's about your track record. It's about your background. It's about what you did and what you've done and all that. And that's important. Like, I get invited places to go speak and do my work because of my professional credibility, right? So it's important. People get jobs because of that. We get opportunities in life and business. So it's not that it's not important. It's just, but in terms of really in the moment connecting with people, making an impact, and actually being able to fully show up, that doesn't have to do with professional credibility. That has to do with personal credibility. That has to do with allowing ourselves to be seen and seeing other people. That has to do with people being able to relate to us. And the world that we live in now, especially with everything going on in the world, people don't want to see the shiny versions of us all the time. They want to know what's really going on. Because when we do that, we give them permission to engage with us in that same way. And I think ultimately that's what we want.
There's so much power in there, especially when you talk about working with teams and you have them answer that question and it shows that vulnerability. To change gears for a second, what you're talking about has a great deal with people wanting or accepting to change. And that's hard for people. And I heard you say once that people almost fear and yearn for change almost simultaneously. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, someone years ago, a teacher of mine said this great thing, that why change is so difficult is because we seek it and fear it at the same time. So like there's a yearning. Look, some of us are more, I mean, we're all different personality wise, and some of us like things to be the same all the time. And but in general, there is an interest and a desire that most of us have very naturally to want to change, to want to evolve, to want to expand, to want to grow. And that's exciting. And at the same time, change is scary. It's different. It's new. And even positive change can be upsetting. This last year, my wife and I and our girls, we bought a new house. We moved into a beautiful new house that we're so blessed to be in and we love. And it's been kind of a culmination of a number of things to get to the point where we could buy this house and move into this house. And it was so interesting because after we got done, and moving's kind of a thing, and we've moved a few times in the last few years, and we get all the move and we're settled in the house. And Michelle and I looked at each other and I said, why am I so upset? Like, this is a good thing. Right. And we were laughing about it, talking about it. It's like, wow, it's amazing. Here's this positive change, this thing we wanted, we chose. It wasn't some quote negative thing that was forced on us. But like, I sat in my beautiful new house and definitely felt a sense of gratitude. But I noticed that I was feeling upset. And the upset underneath it was really this fear, this discomfort, this like, wow, this is new. This is scary. This is uncomfortable. It's vulnerable. Oh, this is that part of fearing the change. Right. And so, again, we've all had experiences with that. And when change gets forced upon us and it's difficult, it's challenging, something happens, life happens, somebody, right, decides they don't want to be in a relationship with us anymore, or a business thing falls through, or we have some kind of health challenge, whatever. I mean, those are challenges and changes that we don't necessarily want at all. So the context of the change, the nature of it can absolutely influence that. But again, even really positive ones that we've wanted can be upsetting. So one of the things that we got to do around this, and oftentimes when I come in, especially into organizations to talk about change, or when I'm working with people individually, is to honor our emotional process through change. Both quote good changes and quote bad changes, because even the bad ones, and for me as someone who's lost both of my parents and my sister and a mentor of mine and some people really close to me, this is absolutely true when we go through grief. There are stages to the process. It's not easy. It's very painful. And it can be incredibly liberating and healing and transformational, as it has been for me. But what's important is that we honor the process and honor our process. And we live in a culture that wants us to just move on and get over it and get on to the next thing and go produce the next result or go, whatever. And that's not always easy to do. So I think it's really important that we go even deeper within our process around change, because change is happening all the time. And, we might be really excited about it in the moment, but a lot of times it can be scary. I mean, even just look at the world we live in terms of technology. As great as it is, as much as I love it, we're sitting here on this podcast having this conversation. People can listen to this all over the world on a variety of different platforms and devices. How cool is that? And you know what? Sometimes I get really overwhelmed by all the change in technology. It's hard to keep up with. I love and hate my smartphone at the same time. Like sometimes I just want to throw it out the window and never look at it again because it makes me crazy. I'm like friggin' addicted to it. And you know what I mean? So it's like, wow. And sometimes I feel like an idiot. Sometimes I don't know what to do. And sometimes something doesn't work. And then, oh my God, so the technology breaks down. I can't figure it out. Like my whole life stops. And I'm like, you know what I mean? So it's not one thing or the other. It's all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. To switch gears to what you're working on now, I know, I've really enjoyed the podcast. Anyone listening, check out Mike's podcast, Bring Your Whole Self to Work, which is actually the title of the book that he's working on now. Yeah, I feel like it's a culmination maybe of a lot of your previous work of, authenticity and appreciation,
Yep.
self-acceptance. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the goals you have for the book and what you've maybe just figured out along the way?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was sitting in my office one day and I was just brainstorming, and someone had asked me a question, because one of the things about my work over the years that I've always, I've never been really good at the whole sort of, Chris, I read this on your website too, the whole, what do you do? Or people ask me that question, and what tell me about your work, or what, and I'm not good at this sort of elevator pitch, as you can hear just from talking to me here. I'm not short-winded, number one. And number two, like getting to the essence of, well, what is it that I do? I mean, I talk about different things, and, all the work that I've done in the corporate world over the years has been both really fun to me and exciting and interesting, but sometimes kind of surprising to me because, starting out, like, I'm not really a corporate guy. Like that, it kind of happened in some ways by accident. Like I started telling my story, I started sharing what I was sharing, I started relating the experience that I'd had as an athlete and then what I learned in business. But so here I am all these years later, and someone had asked me, what do you think it is that you really do? What is it that you're trying to get people to do? And I was like, it was this really basic question. I'm like, I'm sort of stumped. So I'm like writing in my journal, and all of a sudden I started writing down this phrase over and over again: bring your whole self to work, bring your whole self to work. And I'm like, why am I writing that? And then I started to think about it. It's like, that's so much of what I've been attempting to say and teach and do, and what I'm wanting the people that I work with, the organizations that bring me in, is like, how do we create the environment and the conditions where it feels safe enough and it's encouraged for people to really show up with all of who they are? And then I started to think about some of the most successful business leaders that I'd worked with, and just people in general. And I'm like, they're unique and different, but there seems to be this underlying confidence, or willingness at least, to not necessarily always have to play by the rules and check all the boxes, but to kind of show up. Here I am. This is who I am. And so that got me thinking, like, I want to write a book about that. And not only do I have a bunch of thoughts and ideas about it, which I do, I know a lot of really interesting people, thought leaders and business leaders and change makers. And I've just been really fortunate over the last 16 or so years doing my work and even before that as an athlete, to just interact with lots of interesting and diverse folks. So I started down the path of wanting to write this book and decided that I wanted to do a series of interviews. And as I started thinking about interviewing folks, I thought, oh, I should launch a podcast. I really like this format. I listen to lots of great podcasts like yours and others. And so that's kind of what got me started with it. And the more I've been doing research on this and looking at it, the more I realize, like, in today's world, especially, both for individuals and for our own fulfillment and our own success, again, whether we work in a big corporation or we work for ourselves or we work for a small business, it's like having the ability to bring all of who we are to the work that we do is a huge, not only differentiator, but it's essential for our well-being, for our engagement, for our creativity, for our enthusiasm about what we're doing, and for organizations. As I have the honor of working with a lot of great companies, particularly a lot of companies here in Silicon Valley near where I live, like, the cultures that I've seen that are the most vibrant, where people really want to be there, want to stay there, want to work, are ones in which people are encouraged to bring themselves fully, not leave pieces of themselves at home. So that's kind of what got me started. And I'm learning a ton. It's been really fun. I've been, fortunate to get a lot of wisdom from a lot of people. And I'm excited because whenever I'm writing something like a new book, I always want to write it, and my intention is to inspire others with it. But I'm always, A, grappling with some of it in my own life, and B, wanting to learn, how can I more fully bring all of who I am to the work that I do? Because that's one of the things that's been showing up. Oh, where are the places where I hold back? Where are the places where I don't speak up? Where are the places where I'm just trying to act like whatever because I think that's what I need to do to be successful? So it's always a personal journey for me. So I'm having fun with it.
On the podcast, you start each episode with asking each guest, what does it mean for them to bring their whole self to work?
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
Ooh, I think it means showing up in the moment. It means being willing to take risks, being willing to fail. And for me, it's really about bringing, for me, my passion and my truth, all of who I am, not just the parts that I think are acceptable or appropriate or qualified. That's been one of the challenges for me in my work now, this many years into it, is that early on, even though it was hard and I was nervous and I was insecure and I was still in that mode of like, can I do this? Can I make it? I think now a different challenge is, I'm quote unquote established, whatever that means. Now, is there an expectation? People expect certain things from, again, it could all be made up in my brain, which a lot of it probably is, but this is part of, so bringing my whole self to work is also about being creative and doing and trying new things, even when that may not be what I think I'm good at or what I think people expect from me, and trusting my process and trusting the process. Because part of the battle for me inside myself is often that, like, I like to be good at things. I like the results, right? As we were talking about earlier. And so therefore I have a tendency, ironically, to not want to change, because if things are working, I want to keep doing what works. But bringing my whole self to work is often about trying new things, whether they work or not, just for the sheer fun of it, the sheer creativity of it, the sheer excitement of it, the growth of it. So that's a long question a long answer to a question that I often ask, but I appreciate being asked.
So Mike, throughout this process with the new book, what surprises or epiphanies did you have along the way, if any?
Well, I'm still in the midst of it, but I would say one of the things that's been really interesting, and it may just be the nature of who I've interviewed. I've interviewed a number of men who are gay, who talked about their process of coming out at work in various ages of these men in particular, which again is just, as a straight man, not having that experience, I have no idea what that's like, not only to be gay, but to come out. And then what would that be like at work? Particularly, it's one thing to do it in today's world. It's another thing to do it in like 1982, in the midst of the AIDS epidemic, when people are freaking out, and homophobia, which still exists significantly, was at a whole other level that many years ago. So I've really appreciated people's willingness to talk about something as sensitive as that, just as an example. And the thing that's been enlightening to me about that, not just that specific issue or experience, but when we're having the conversation about bringing our whole selves to work, what people tend to talk about and focus on a lot doesn't have to do with work. Right, which is kind of what I sort of already knew going into this, but it has to do with who they are as a human being. It has to do with what really matters, their core values, their biggest challenges. We've also had a lot of conversations around grief and loss, and some of it's because I've experienced quite a bit of that, and my sister just passed away last year, so that I bring it up and talk about it. But it's interesting to me that when I share about my own grief experience, it often gives people permission to do the same thing. And that's a lot of what I see both in researching for and working on this book, but just in general, that there's a longing for and almost a starving for genuineness and authenticity and vulnerability. And it is scary and uncomfortable. And so sometimes what it takes, even for me, it takes someone else going first to make it safer. And when that happens, it's amazing how most of us want to jump into that sort of deep end of the pool because it's real. So I've been really appreciating the realness of that, and sometimes I catch myself even with resistance to some of my own work. Oh, people aren't into this, or this is a little too out there, or this is too weird, or whatever story I have, which is again part of the negative self-talk that holds me back. But I'm always amazed and appreciative when I realize, oh yeah, that's just a story. That's not true. Like, people, especially in today's world, I think are yearning for depth and meaning and truth and purpose. And like, I feel like authenticity, look, especially in the political climate that we're in today, is like authenticity and truth are more important than they've ever been. And I just feel like all of us who have any sense of courage or desire to tell the truth, our own truth, that it's time for us to continue to keep stepping up and speaking up as much as we can.
And then as you tie that into the workplace, I feel like, just to kind of circle back around on the authenticity that you were referring to, if we're able to be vulnerable, if we're able to not be self-righteous and put all that aside, I feel like, yes, the lows can be low because we're having to expose ourselves, and it can be challenging and fearful to expose more of ourselves. But then the highs, but we also at the same time have somebody to go through those lows with. We don't feel like we're doing it on our own. But then the highs can also be a lot higher because we have somebody also to go to enjoy those highs with.
Absolutely. And it's just, look, what's funny about it, I think what we all do, and it makes sense. My friend Robert Holden likes to say, if you live, by the time you're 30 years old, most of us have had enough experiences in life to justify being miserable for the rest of our lives, right? Like we've gone through, and even maybe had a pretty easy life, but there's things that happen in life. If you live, to that point, I happen to be 43 at this moment in my life. And even if you're younger than 30, like we have stuff that happens. Like if we want to hold on to the negative experiences or the ways in which things didn't go quite the way we wanted them to as children, or at some point, or we got our heart broken, or something happened, or some dream didn't turn out, whatever. And I don't mean to diminish any of that, because those are real and significant. But like life becomes, as we move through life and as we get a little bit older and a little more conscious and realize, wow, I really have a lot of say over how this thing goes. I'm not simply just a victim of my circumstances or even my own thoughts. And one of the things that I think that we do to try to protect ourselves from harm in life, because we've all been hurt and it's been painful, we armor up. Right? Back early, it's not just a male thing, but it's the be a man, suck it up. We learn early on, okay, be a man, suck it up, have confidence even when you don't. And again, women learn a different version of that same story, but we all as humans, we armor up, and particularly in our professional lives, and we put on some armor and we carry a shield around and we say, they're not going to mess with me, whoever they are, right? Like they're not going to hurt my feelings. They're not going to disappoint me. They're not going to reject me. They're not going to, right? And that's crazy because like that happens anyway. It just does, right? It's part of like, you want to do anything great in life. You want to experience anything. You want to fall in love. You want to make a dream or a goal happen. Like there's no guarantee. I mean, it would be literally like saying to somebody, hey, will you marry me, but promise not to break my heart? Like you can't really make that request. Because, my wife and I were having this conversation the other night. 16 years into our relationship, 11 and a half years into marriage. And in a vulnerable moment just the other night, I was saying to Michelle, I have these moments where something will come up or something will happen and I'll get triggered. And it's really nothing about her, but I'll just go into this place of like, oh my God, like, what if she leaves me? Or, with my recent experiences with death and loss too, like, what if she dies? Again, it's just part of being human. And I like to, without freaking her out, talk about that so that it's not just swimming around in my head. And she looked at me and she said this really beautiful and powerful thing. And she said, look, we know we love each other. We also know we've already broken each other's hearts many times. And at some point, one of us is going to die before the other one. Right. And of course but like, she's like, so, and what she was saying in a really sweet and loving, compassionate way is just like, I hear you, I see you, I know that comes up, but like, what are you protecting yourself from? And that to me is a very specific and personal example, but like we do that in life. Like, what are we really protecting ourselves from? Are we protecting ourselves from rejection? Yeah, maybe, but like, have we gotten rejected before? Yes. Did we live? Yes. Did it hurt? Yes. Were we okay? Yes. Are we protecting ourselves from failure? Okay, maybe that makes sense, but have we failed before? Yes. Did it hurt? Yes. Did we like it? No, probably not. Did we learn from it? Hopefully. It's like, are we protecting ourselves from embarrassment? From what? And again, if we really look at this and really challenge ourselves, what would it be like to be in life without the shield, without the armor? Someone recently said to me, enlightenment is being in life without a strategy. And I was like, oh my God, it had me stop and go, geez, I am so strategic so much of the time. Wow. Like, and it doesn't know, look, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with being strategic about our business and having ideas and plans and all that, but like, what if we weren't living our life so obsessed with some strategy for how we were going to control it all and have it all turn out? Because like, it doesn't work that way. As much as I would love it, the controlling part of me would love it. Here's the strategy. And if I just follow the strategy, everything's going to turn out. But it's like, it doesn't work like that. You know, it's like my mentor has said to me years ago, Mike, you're living your life as though you're trying to survive it. And I said, yeah, so? And he said, you have to remember something really important. I said, what's that? He said, nobody ever has.
Mike, I feel like these last few words were just hitting me right in the gut. I'm taking out the Art of War out of my back pocket right now. I need to put down the strategy. Chris knows, man. I'm a strategy guy through and through. Yeah. I wake up in the morning. What's my strategy? I go to bed at night. What do I got to do tomorrow? It's just I can't let it go. So those are very powerful words. I appreciate that. So one last question for you in relation to the audience. What's a final message, piece of advice? What do you want to leave everybody with?
Oh, I think, look, I think most of us, myself included, can just do a much better job of appreciating and honoring and acknowledging ourselves. You know, it's not about perfection. It's not about getting it all right. It's not about having the right strategy. Look, and strategy in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's just, I think one of the traps that I fall into, and I think many of us fall into, in our desire to be successful, to be fulfilled, to accomplish our goals and dreams, whatever they may be, is we just get really hard on ourselves and critical. And I just don't think it serves us. So like wherever you are in your life right now, whatever's going on, however great you think it's going or however challenging it is, and it's probably some version of both if you're a human being and you're alive, like what would it take to actually live life with more compassion, more empathy, more appreciation, more love for yourself? Because when we do that, when I do that, and it's something that I've been practicing and been challenged by for much of my life, but when I really get into that place of self-acceptance and self-compassion and self-appreciation and self-love, from there, the choices that I make, the strategies that I have, the actions that I take, the stuff that I go for and want, it comes from just a deeper, more authentic place. And I'm not looking for those things, those outcomes, or those results to fill me up. I'm going for them because I want them and I'm excited about them, but I don't need them in order to be okay with myself.
Well, Mike, yeah, these last few minutes have definitely hit home. As you're talking about Michelle's response to your vulnerable moment, I was getting goosebumps myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. For anyone out there listening, most of what we've talked about been Mike's written about and discussed in his books. Be yourself. Everyone else has already taken. Focus on the good stuff, the power of appreciation. His most recent book, Nothing Changes Until You Do, a guide to self-compassion and getting out of your own way. And yeah, Mike, your new book, which I'm looking forward to coming out, I guess probably sometime next year, but you can definitely check out his podcast, Bring Your Whole Self to Work, to get updates and to hear how the whole process is coming along. So thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Keep up the good work.
You do the same, buddy. Take care. So that was our conversation with Mike Robbins. Sean, what were your takeaways there?
For me, what we talked about last in relation to being in the moment more, that you don't have to have a strategy at all times. I mean, Chris, you know me, every morning, noon, and night, that's all I do is think about what's the next move, what's 3 steps ahead, 5 steps ahead, 10 steps
You're
ahead.
The strategy guy, man.
So it's so important to hear that message for me personally, to make sure that I'm not so focused on the future, where I want to go, that I'm neglecting to enjoy the present and honor the process. I think a lot of people that are striving for something, whether they're trying to build a business, whether they're trying to scale their business, trying to be an entrepreneur, whatever it's going to be, a lot of people are so focused on where they need to go that they're not really honoring that process or being in the moment. So what about you?
For me, it was great to connect with him. Like I said, before we chatted, that I've been following Mike for a while now, and I first found him through his work on appreciation and through authenticity and enjoy just as much of that work as the work he's doing now, but really kind of goes back to him talking about authenticity and really like what his definition of that is, because we all want to be authentic because that's where we really are being our most true selves. But that means for him being, vulnerable, which it's hard to be vulnerable because it's scary and people can find ways to hurt us. And the other part is not being self-righteous, when you feel like you're right or you feel like you have the right answer, not shoving that in someone else's face. Because even if you are right, it doesn't really mean much at the end of the day if it pushes you away from someone that's important to you, whether it's in your personal life or in work or whatever it might be. So, for me, I think it's just important to like look and see, all right, like how am I being vulnerable? And am I, even if I'm right about something, am I using that rightness in a way that's going to help move this relationship forward, or is it going to push me farther away? That's going to keep me from getting the things I want out of this relationship. So, I think across the board, I love Mike's work. I love what he's doing. For all you guys, we would love for you to let Mike know on Facebook or Twitter what you think about the conversation and what he's doing. You can find him at Mike-Robbins, Robbins. And then on Facebook, he is Mike Robbins Page. And on Twitter, he is Mike D. Robbins. So we'd love for you to let us know what you think. Also, you can stop by the website, chrishillonline.com/podcast, and check out the show notes. Leave a comment for us there as well. And we would really appreciate you leaving a review and letting us know what you think, whether it's on Stitcher or iTunes or somewhere else out there on the web. So anyway, we appreciate you joining us. And on that note, how about something to close us down with, Sean?
Here's a thought from Mike Robbins. Most conflict can be resolved with only one 10-minute sweaty palm conversation.
On that note, we're signing off. We'll see you next time.